Endurance rotation is 67, 68 RPM.
Okay, get ready to match our spin with the retro thrusters.
It's not possible.
No, it's necessary.
Endurance is hitting stratosphere.
She's got no heat shield.
Okay, she ready?
Ready. Cooper, this is no time for caution.
Ace, if I black out, you take a stick. Stars, get ready to engage the docking mechanism.
Endurance is starting to heat.
20 feet out.
I need 3 degrees starboard, Cooper.
10 feet out.
Cooper, we are lined up.
Initiating spin.
Come on, Tars. Come on, Tars. We are locked, Cooper.
Locked. Easing up. Easy.
Easy.
Retro thrusters. Main engines on. Pushing out of orbit. Come on, baby. Killing main engines. Okay, we're out of orbit.
Welcome everyone to Director Showcase. I am your host, as always, Alex Elmer. Joined by me to my right is Jacob the Package Cunningham.
I don't even want to do the show anymore. I just want to watch Interstellar now after that.
You can still do both at the same time. I'm sure we'll go as long as Interstellar.
Just
if not
fire
even
it up
longer.
on
You
another
might
tab.
you might have time to do a Barbenheimer experience afterwards. And then below us, special guest co-host, you've seen him before. You know, the automatic, he's come off the bench. He's subbing in for Holmes today. It's Luke from Luke Reviews.
Hello, thank you for inviting me along. Probably the best episode for me to be on, and yeah, that scene definitely did a lot for 12-year-old me back in 2014.
Yes, and our special guest for this month, Jennifer Vega from YouTube. You can check her out on her channel, link in the description below. Jennifer, your first time on the channel, welcome. Nice to meet you. How are you doing today? And, how excited are you to talk some Nolan?
I'm extremely excited. I'm also extremely excited you chose Interstellar for the intro because I literally have the movie right behind me. I love Christopher Nolan, obviously, so I'm very excited to be here talking about him and his work, and it's really nice to meet you all. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And kind of tell us, everyone, kind of about your channel as well. Those who don't know, those who aren't familiar with your channel, kind of what you do over there, and all sorts of movie-related content that you produce.
Yeah, so I mostly do movie reviews, but I've done rankings, top 10 lists, collection videos, pretty much anything under the realm of movies. And I also do some like filmmaking type videos because I am a film student, so I do make my own films and try to put that onto the channel as much as possible. But yeah, you guys can find me on YouTube. It's just my name, Jennifer Vega, and I hope to see you guys there on my channel.
For sure. And can you also tell everyone, because obviously we have a guest every month and they're the ones who choose the director. You chose Nolan. Can you tell us a bit about why?
So Nolan, I think, is the first director that I watched all of his movies consistently, and I sort of realized like the dude is a master. Like there are so many great directors out there, but for me, Christopher Nolan is, in my opinion, one of the best and the one that has inspired me as a future filmmaker, an aspiring one. And a lot of his movies, what I really love about them is that they're endlessly rewatchable in my opinion, and I always pick up on things as I rewatch them, and that's something that I personally, when I'm writing films and making them, it's something that I'm trying to do in my work. So obviously I also chose it because Barbenheimer is this month, but also he's my favorite filmmaker and he inspires me endlessly, and like I could talk and watch his movies all day every day. So super thrilled to be talking about Nolan.
For sure. And I think we're all, I can speak for Jacob and Luke when I say that we're also super hyped to talk about some Nolan, especially coming off of the heels of Oppenheimer, still out this weekend in its first weekend. So I think we're all really hyped. Luke, we chose you as kind of the guest to fill in for Holmes today, and there's a reason why. Talk about Christopher Nolan for us, please.
Yeah, like I mentioned, Interstellar 2014, that was the movie that opened my eyes to, oh, this is what movies can be. Like 2014 is a big year for me in general, just developing my taste. Amazing Spider-Man 2, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Transformers, Age of Extinction.
Of course.
Those develops my taste, as you can see my taste today, but Interstellar was the big one. And that when I finished it, I Googled it, I Wikipedia'd it, just read everything I could about it. And a few years later, when I was getting into movies more, I was watching Christopher Nolan movies, your Dunkirk, and now lead up to Tenet. I watched all of his movies all the way through when I was still active Look reviews, and yeah, he's the probably the most popular director working today, I think. Also my favorite, and I just love his style of films. They're dialogue heavy, they're high concept heavy, the sci-fi ones especially, but he can do the real stuff equally as good. And he's just a very technically gifted director, and I love movies where the technical aspect is on full display.
For sure, guys. And if you're not familiar with how the show Director Showcase works, we're going to be going through a bunch of subcategories, which we're going to be talking about kind of the best, some of the worst of Christopher Nolan and all kind of different aspect of his movies. So make sure to stick around. And if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel for more sim-related content, more Director Showcase like this. Who knows? Maybe your favorite director could be next month, could be the month afterwards. Send us some suggestions over which directors you might want to see an episode featuring. So let's get started with the first category. We're going to be talking about Best Nolan Screenplay. Jacob, I'm going to go to you first. What is your favorite Nolan screenplay?
Yeah, this is an episode where the questions actually weren't as tough as they often are. I think there's easy to put a lot of his films in boxes, but this is a tough one because I think he's often a better writer than he's given credit for. I know he's often been criticized of his movies being cold and stuff, but I think he's the OD, and all of his movies are really earnest, which I love. You know, he's always wearing his heart on his sleeve and not trying to be overly cynical. But for screenplay, I am going with Memento. Just from a storytelling standpoint, I think that film's genuinely innovative and revolutionary in the way a film story is told. It's a great character study as well, something that often isn't at the forefront of Nolan's films. And while it's not maybe among my absolute favorite films of his, I think when I think of writing, when I think of storytelling, I think him and Jonathan Nolan wrote it together. I think, what that film did for screenwriting and storytelling, it's super influential. And I haven't seen it in a long time. I really need to throw that one back on, but Memento is going to be my pick there.
Yeah, same. I haven't seen Memento in a long time, but I remember I now kind of feel foolish for not considering that as one of my top two options. especially considering what you said, how revolutionary it is. But it definitely needs a rewatch, and perhaps it would get my pick for this.
I have a very close second, and I'm pretty sure someone will pick it.
So my number one, I went, I considered a lot, but this one's pretty generic. I had to go for it though. It's The Dark Knight. So number one, from a plot standpoint, I think the plot of The Dark Knight is so cohesive and it sets itself apart from so many other crime movies just on the basis of its intelligent writing and kind of everything that happens, the obstacles that The Dark Knight faces, and kind of how everything evolves and how everything changes and develops story-wise and character-wise by the end of the movie compared to where we start out. I think the character of Harvey Dent, played by Aaron Eckhart, or Two-Face, is tremendous. I think he is actually the heartbeat of the film, and I think that character doesn't get enough credit. We might talk about him later on, but I think that character speaks a lot to me, and I think his downfall is just really well done. I think the Joker, obviously, the writing for that character is tremendous. Batman himself, and then, like I said before, just the way the plot moves on. I remember when I first watched it, I was just so taken by the amount that Batman has to go through in this movie and what he has to think about and what he has to do in order to kind of get himself out of these deep holes. So
many great moral questions in that movie too.
Like the boat scene
that looks at humanity as a whole. Yeah.
The boat scene is one of my favorite, maybe my favorite kind of sequences in the movie. Like you said, kind of when you talk about kind of moral, not just kind of physical barriers, but moral barriers as well. I think it's very well written, and the movie as a whole, it's a generic pick. The Dark Knight, you can pick it for a lot of categories, but I had to go for screenplay for it as well. Luke, what's your pick for screenplay?
Yeah, this was my toughest category because usually I'm just like ranking or selecting movies on a whole. To pick it as a sole screenplay is a different task. So I was considering, your Dark Knights. I even think Inception, some of Tenet, if it wasn't all the I do have some problems with it on last
If
rewatch,
anyone picked Tenet for screenplay, I'd leave the chat right now.
I think there's definitely really good ideas in that screenplay, but some of it does falter a little. But I'm gonna go for Oppenheimer, just because maybe it's because I did read the book and lead up to it, and he did not miss out anything from that 600-page book. The only stuff he left out was what happened before the movie and after the movie. Shout out to Ultimate.
I still love
David
you,
over there. But no, to deliver that amount of information, and a lot of people say Nolan movies are confusing. There's a lot of exposition, a lot of information. I really don't mind exposition in movies, like ever. I don't know what it is. I just enjoy listening. Well. I just enjoy listening to it, and Nolan delivers it well.
You're just saying that because of the Flash spaghetti scene. That's the only reason you're saying.
No, but that's a great scene, though. It's a perfect analogy. For the multiverse, but whatever. Wrong weekend to talk about that. No, Oppenheimer. Yeah, there's just so much information, and it's all comprehensive, but then it's that you have the nonlinear storytelling, and that adds a whole another layer of it. If it was just like in one straight chronological line, that movie would be a lot harder to sit through and watch. So even taking that aspect into it, I think Oppenheimer has to be it for me.
That was my close second pick as well. That's really great pick. And for dialogue wise, maybe his best. I just went Memento on the structure side of things.
Jennifer, what was your pick for best screenplay?
Oppenheimer was a close second for me too, because I agree with what Luke said, especially about how if it was linear, like you would have felt those 3 hours. Whereas I think they did a lot of great intercutting between the dialogues and the sequences. But my favorite Nolan screenplay is The Prestige. And I love this movie. I think, in my opinion, it is one of his best movies, but I think in the writing standpoint, it's my favorite because I think it does exactly what the movie is about. The movie is essentially about these two magicians, and nobody knows their secrets. And I think the screenplay itself sort of plays into that a lot, how like all the clues are laid out for us, yet it's all hidden underneath, and we slowly start figuring things out all the way until the big reveal at the end that, in my opinion, is like one of my favorite twists. And I just think the characters are also written extremely well, and it has a lot of talk about a lot of different like morality and what's right and what's wrong. And I just think it's a very underrated Nolan movie in my opinion. I feel like a lot of people don't talk about it. Sort of in the same vein as Memento, because I totally didn't even really consider it for the screenplay, although you did have a lot of good points in how you talked about it. But I think The Prestige is just so good. I think the characters are so well written and very well rounded, and it's sort of this like movie where the characters are almost morally gray for a lot of it, because they do a lot of wrong things, but you don't they do a lot of wrong things, but it doesn't make you hate them. And I love movies where the characters are written in a way where they're not either good or bad. They're just kind of sort of in the middle, and you're trying to figure out like, who am I actually rooting for in this movie? Like, what is the right decision? And I think Nolan wrote that really well. I think he wrote that alongside his brother, maybe, if I remember correctly, Jonathan Nolan. But just really, really well written. I love The Prestige, and I remember when I saw it, when I was doing like my Nolan binge, I was like, why are more people not talking about this? Like, I feel like I don't hear enough talk about this movie, and I love this movie. It has my favorite twists. It has some of my favorite writing, honestly, in movies in general. So I love The Prestige.
Sits in the same ballpark as Memento for me, in that like I haven't seen it in a while, but they're both like we really as a collective don't talk enough about the pre-Batman Nolan movies.
It's crazy though how good Nolan is. The fact that we don't talk about The Prestige as much. I remember it has an 8.5 on IMDb, which is it's definitely in their top 100. I don't know where specifically it lies, but for any other director, it would be their magnum opus. I feel like, but yeah, need to rewatch for me. Same as Jake.
Cloning Machine.
Great pick. Luke, we'll go to you now first in the next category of best supporting performance in a Nolan movie.
Oh, no. Do you guys want to say it at the same time?
Just everyone jump in.
Everyone, 3, 2, 1. Heath Ledger.
Heath Ledger.
Dark
Kenneth
Knight.
Branagh and Tenet.
Yeah.
No.
No one else.
No.
A close third behind. Tom
I
Hardy's
pride
Bane.
myself.
close
I
30th.
pride myself on hot takes, but it's fucking Heath Ledger. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think in 15 years we haven't stopped talking about that performance. We still put it up there as one of the greatest villains ever. And just what he did with that character. Of course, I wasn't really there in the lead up to the film, so I can't really speak much about the controversy behind his casting or the reaction to that. But I just know the cultural impact that performance and that image of him in that movie has left on the landscape of comic book movies and just cinema in general.
Yeah,
Truly one of the greatest Australian actors of all time in such a short career, and I didn't really know much about who he was until after he died because I was so young, and I still feel absolute heartbreak over his loss. And yeah, that truly is one of the great performances of all time, not just within Nolan's filmography.
I also feel like it stands alone, obviously, amongst all the Nolan movies. There are really good performances in Nolan movies, but obviously this is the only one that won an Oscar. I believe, it's not the only one that was nominated for an Oscar. Was there another one that was? I mean, obviously,
it might be, but I'm not 100%.
Any others, in fact, that was nominated for an Oscar. So it was the only one that was nominated, at least for right now, until someone might contradict me, and then obviously win an Oscar as well. It's not just one of the best. It's not just the best comic book movie performance of all time. People hold it amongst some of the best ever performances to be seen on the big screen. So, yeah.
I didn't watch The Dark Knight until I was a little bit older, honestly. But I remember my cousin used to like love the Batman movies, and he would put them on TV all the time. And I remember being really young and seeing Heath Ledger as the Joker, and I was terrified. And then when I actually did end up watching the movie, I was like, wow, he killed it. Like, absolutely killed it. Yeah, this one was one of them. When I saw Best Supporting Performance, I'm like, definitely Heath Ledger. Like, so good.
All right, let's move on now. We're going to go to Best Nolan Score. Jennifer, we can start with you this time. What's your favorite Nolan score? Are we going
really
Zimmer?
hard.
Are we going Goranson? What are we going here?
This was really hard. Like, I honestly went back and forth between like 3 movies, and I think I'm confident in this one. I'm gonna go with Inception, just because Time by Hans Zimmer is one of my favorite scores ever. It's so cinematic, and I just love the score in that movie. And it was really hard. My close second was Interstellar, which is another Hans Zimmer. So I love it because it's sort of like it just builds these very cinematic scenes and makes them so much grander, but they still have tones of emotions in there. And I think that's when I love a movie score so much, because you know, it's not just like really great to listen to, but it makes sense with what's going on screen. And it was really hard to pick this one, but I have to go with Inception, because I think also this was one of the first Nolan movies that I really fell in love with, and I had to remember part of the reason was because I loved the music so much. Like it's one of those things where like it just clicked, like it makes sense. And yeah, Inception is my pick.
And it brought the blah noise to the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Luke, I have a feeling us three might have the same pick. I don't know. Maybe not. We'll see. But
I don't know.
Luke, what's
I
your-
want to talk about one if none of you pick it. So maybe one of you go.
Oh, okay.
next.
You want to go last? All right. Yeah. All right. I'll jump in with probably maybe the predictable pick, which is Interstellar for me. I'm a Hans Zimmer guy when it comes to Nolan, although I will say the Oppenheimer score is really damn good. So Ludwig might be starting to win me over there, but I wasn't huge on the Tenet score. But like Zimmer, Dunkirk, very close second for me. But Interstellar, yeah, it's one of my favorite scores ever. I think every single movie score would be improved by having a pipe organ in it. That is just one of my favorite sounds in the world. I love that shit.
Yes.
Yep, you get it. I'm always seeking out musicians that use pipe organs in their music that just sound so epic and grandiose. But yeah, even sound mixing issues be damned. I don't even care that score drowns out the dialogue, because I love listening to it so much. It's so powerful. That docking scene might still be maybe my favorite scene from Nolan's career, and a big part of that is the score. So yeah, Interstellar pretty easily.
Shout out to the pipe organs. Also shout out
Yes.
to Davy Jones's theme. Luke, I got you. Don't worry.
Absolutely.
Immediately when you said pipe organ, I was like, Davy Jones's theme, Hans Zimmer too. So honorable mention,
gets
even
it.
though it's not a Nolan movie, honorable mention. But I'm also going Interstellar for the same reasons Jacob mentioned. I mean, we saw that one scene from Interstellar earlier in the episode, and yeah, it speaks for itself. It's a really emotional score. It's also played in certain sequences that make it so memorable, like the cornfield chase as well. I just think it stands alone amongst so many great scores, and I think it's the most emotionally attachable score. Like you mentioned Tenet real quickly, Jacob. I don't think I can't really attach myself to that. It's just, for me, I like it, but at times it's just a bunch of random noises and just very loud. And for me, I couldn't connect to it very well. But this one I felt was, yeah, just stood alone amongst so many great scores. So that's mine. And one of the best scores of the 21st century as well. It's so good. Luke, you said you had a surprise.
What's
pick.
the
Well,
pick?
Alex, I think I might have to listen to the Oppenheimer score a few more times, but I do enjoy the loud random noises of Tenet. I do think we need to mention Ludwig in this conversation, because I think that partnership is something that will make for some amazing results in the years to come, because it was just so different to anything that Hans Zimmer brought to Nolan movies. It was very dynamic. You had the pieces of the music were very different from scene to scene. One had Travis Scott howling in the background as the trucks were going down the street of Tallinn. Just a Freeport one where it's like that's my best impression. So I just wanted to give a shout out to that one, but I would otherwise put Interstellar as my number one for the reasons that you guys mentioned.
Also, just shout out to the way Dunkirk uses the rising and falling tones to make it feel like it's getting louder. It's like, that is, in terms of intensity, that is, I listened to that a lot when it came out.
The one part of the tennis score I liked, maybe this hurt me, was in the trailer, or I think it was the one that Luke did the impression of. So that I was like, oh, it probably gets so much better than from here.
That could be any of them, actually.
Why don't we have a best Nolan song category so we can talk about Travis Scott, who is the key to all this?
All right, let's move on now to our next category, worst Nolan movie. We usually do this later in the episode, but there's not too many to choose from. I can go first. I'm going with Following for reasons that I don't feel like I have to elaborate too much on. It's his worst movie, but I still like it. I think I gave it like a 7 out of 10. It's a good movie. It just doesn't feel too much like Nolan. I don't think it's too creative in the way if the story structure is okay, but I'm in terms of camera work, I don't think it has that same gravitas as a lot of his other movies. It's good, obviously, very low budget, very low compared to all of his other movies, except maybe Memento. But yeah, that's my pick, just on the basis of I can't pick Oppenheimer, The
by
Prestige, or
default.
Dark Knight trilogy, or so. Whatever, I'm going with Following. Jennifer, what's your pick?
Yeah, I have to go with that one too for pretty much the exact same reasons. Like, it's not a horrible movie by any means, but it's like it's his first film. It's like I've been there, but I do want to say that my second, I guess, I hate saying worst movie, but it's just a movie that I've never really liked, and it's Dunkirk. And I've tried to like that movie so many times, and I just don't like it. But it's not a bad movie by any means. So I hate saying like, oh, this is my worst Nolan movie, because I by no means do I think it's a horrible movie at all. I just think it's like maybe it's a me problem because I don't really love like war movies that much, and obviously the entire movie is obviously about the war, but I don't know, it's like that movie that I never get bored in a Nolan movie, and every single time I put on Dunkirk, I'm always very bored by it. But yeah, I know that's probably a hot take because so many people love Dunkirk, but not for me. But I
think not enough people love Dunkirk.
Exactly. I'm with Jacob on that one.
I just don't. I've tried to watch this movie so many times, and I'm always like, I don't want to keep watching it, if that makes sense. But it's not bad. I feel bad saying that because I think there's a lot of really good elements to it. Like, it really puts you in the war. It like I like it has so much good going for it. But it's one of those things where I'm like, it's just not for me.
Fair enough.
I was on your team, but I rewatched it on a plane, and I think that's the way to go. I rewatched last Monday.
The way Nolan intended.
Yeah, exactly. And I liked it a lot more, but that's just me.
That's it, Jennifer. You gotta next time you're on a plane, fire up Dunkirk, and then you'll be enlightened.
I'll be on a plane this Thursday, so I might do that. I might try that.
That's good. Luke, what's your pick?
Yeah, I'm going with Following. It's his first movie. It's kind of like a very high budget student film in a way. It's kind of oxymoron there, student film, high budget, but that's kind of what it is. But you can still see the roots of the Nolanisms, the non-linear storytelling, especially the sort of mysterious feeling around it. But yeah, there's just not a whole lot to it. And yeah.
Jacob?
Well, I guess I'll be the lone one popping up in defense of Following. I quite like Following, and maybe I'm the only one at the table who actually does have a Nolan movie they dislike. I'm a huge fan of Nolan. Genuinely so great that such a good director's a household name. But and I thought he had never made a bad film until Tenet came out. I hate Tenet. I love all his other films, but Tenet just did not work for me. I think it is Nolan's unleashing a lot of his worst.
Cry, Jacob.
Like the protagonist, I don't know, man. I can't like the humor didn't work for me. The storyline and makeup of it is very James Bond, which is just not my sort of vibe. I felt that it was so engrossed in the time mechanics that it didn't really engage much with character or with heart, which is what I really like, and something I think Nolan's underrated at doing. But Tenet was one where I think that those criticisms are valid, and that the film was all about the time mechanic, but he didn't really do anything to explore it. And whenever someone was going to go deeper into it, a character would be like, "Oh, don't worry, don't even try to understand it." But like, I want to understand it. That's why I like Nolan movies. I like the details and stuff like that. So Tenet, it bored me to death. I will watch it again at some point, but as it stands, I'm a big Tenet hater. But other than that, I do not think he has a bad movie.
All right, so those are our worst Nolan movies. Yes, it was the perfect frame. I agree. It was not intended, but it was fun nonetheless. As we move on now to our next category, you got the worst out of the way. So it's only up from here. Next we have, what should we do next? Yeah, let's do it. Let's go best Nolan directorial effort. We'll start with Luke here. What is your favorite Nolan directorial effort?
I have two written down, both for very different reasons for why they're so good, but it's between Oppenheimer and Dunkirk. But I'm gonna go with Dunkirk just because that's the best display of Nolan's capability as a technical director just the shot selection, the the non-linear storytelling, of course, which he's very much known for. The sound, everything, just it's tense all the way through. I know Jennifer is not huge on it, but I definitely am. It was my number 2 Nolan movie, but it was my number 1 Nolan movie for a while. But it recently has dropped down to number 2 and now not number 3. Hint for my ranking there. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Dunkirk.
Jennifer, what's yours?
It has to be Oppenheimer. I really loved how he directed this movie, and one of my favorite things about directing in general is how you direct the actors. And I think in this movie, the actors did a phenomenal job. And I just like when I ended this movie, I just want to sit down with Christopher Nolan and talk to him, because the what he was able to get these actors to do, in my opinion, was magnificent. Because I never once saw the actual actors. Like, I was just fully invested and saw the characters. And this movie has like everybody in it. Like, we have like so many big names and so many like cameos here and there from some actors that you've seen in other works. And I just think the entire time, like, he did such a good job at making you feel like almost like if this was like a documentary, like this is actually what's happening, like I'm shooting this in reality. And with the shot selection as well, like this probably is also one of my favorite Nolan endings of all time, and I just have to give that all to his directing and how he was able to like just command everything on screen. And I just think this movie is like near perfect, and I fully think a lot of it is because of his great directing. And like I wrote in my letterbox review, like I want to pick his brains out after watching this movie. Like I just want to sit down and talk to him about it and like give me all the tips, give me all the director like jazz and just like everything, because I just think he did such a good job.
It's some of his boldest directing too. Like, I think I love the way he uses the dream logic moments in that film. Those are some of the most intense moments of the movie. Yeah,
it made
I think
me,
it's gonna
like,
he could win an Oscar for that, I reckon.
And for a lot of lesser directors as well, I'm glad you mentioned those dream moments. They can be like, for example, the one I can think of off the top of my head is Capone, where you have those dream sequences and they just come off as really silly and stupid and they try too hard. But in this one, you're like Jacob said, it increases the tension. So yeah, just want to give some props.
It made me really want to see him do like a horror movie, because those sequences to me, like I was terrified. Like I fully was like on the edge of my seat, and it was like, I wouldn't say a simplistic moment, but it's like it wasn't like, a lot of it was just because like of the way it was directed. I'm like, it's literally perfect. Like you're making me feel exactly as these characters are feeling, and it's terrifying the way like the visuals were showing things. Like I would love to see him do some horror stuff after this. I think that would be so sick.
Yep.
The scene where he gives the speech after the Trinity test is like bone-chilling stuff.
Yeah.
I'm rewatching it tonight after this, so I'm really excited now that I have this. I think it's a movie that would do even better on rewatch now that you kind of know everything ahead of time, and you can just sit there and enjoy those smaller moments and be able to kind of deduce. Because I was just sitting there and I was really nervous.
There's so much to take in on first viewing,
but yeah,
it's a lot of information.
There's so many details. Yeah.
Like
I don't. It got to the point where I was like, I don't even know what character they're referring to at this point. I need to watch this again.
There were
so many men's names.
There was like about 15 minutes of the movie where I was like, I wish I could pause this and like take a moment and like,
me too.
And then I was like, okay, I'm getting it again. But yeah, for sure. That's why I'm like, yeah, I feel like this definitely is one that I need to rewatch.
Especially for the Robert Downey Jr. twist moment. That's one that I need to see again. Because I was like, oh my god, he's a bad guy now. But I didn't get like the specific details. So
that's why that's why I didn't give this like a 5 out of 5, because when that moment happened, I was like, that transition, I like missed it.
Yeah.
And I was like fully paying attention, but I missed that like quick transition, and it took me a minute to like catch up. And it was one of those where I'm like, damn it, like I want to pause this. So I think like definitely when you rewatch it, knowing like I guess the basics and more than that, I feel like you can pick up on different things.
Yeah. Jacob,
that might be my only issue with it too. No, it's not. But it would be up there. But it's Dunkirk. Luke, solidarity, my friend. Where I said I think Tenet unleashes a lot of his worst tendencies. I think Dunkirk is him just operating like at the peak of his powers and doing all the things he does best in terms of it's spectacle, but he's using it for such a tragic and horrific fashion. It's entertaining, but it's also just like, yeah, I think Oppenheimer's scary. I think Dunkirk is even scarier. I've seen it probably 8 times, and every time I watch it, I'm just on the edge of my seat, white knuckling it. And I think the way he converges the 3 timelines, I know that was an issue a lot of people had with the movie, but I think that just culminates so beautifully, even better than the way he merges timelines in Dunkirk. The Tom Hardy story is so tragic, and it sort of blends individual heroism with like criticizing the powers that be, sending these men out there. And I think one of my favorite things he does with this movie is that he doesn't focus on one specific character. It's very much an ensemble piece like Oppenheimer, but it really doesn't. It has a protagonist, but it's really such a loose tapestry of characters, and I think by doing that, it makes you care more about everyone as a whole. Like every single death feels tragic in that film because you are focused on everyone rather than just a select group. And yeah, I think I'm not done talking about Dunkirk for this episode, but 100% for me, that is his. I really wanted him to win the Oscar. Well, actually, I was Team Shape of Water that year, but like in most other years, I would have wanted Nolan to win the Oscar for Dunkirk.
Yeah, so I'm going with The Dark Knight again. Okay, so from a directorial standpoint, I think The Dark Knight #1 when it comes to world building, and that's one of the most important features that you have to get right when directing a Batman movie. And when you talk about the world building, just the amount of memorable scenes and the way the movie just looks from a directorial standpoint, his ability to kind of mesh all those different departments, from a production design to a costumes, to a special effects standpoint, kind of mesh them all together in order to create that perfect movie. I think he does that just perfectly. When you talk about just every scene in the movie that's memorable, from the hospital scene when he blows up the hospital to the first scene where the Joker is kind of when he robs the bank, to the Two-Face stuff at the end, to the boat scene. There's just, and obviously the bike scene where him and Joker having their own kind of twisted version of a Mexican standoff. I think that comes down to him as a director and his ability to construct a movie that has that iconic feel to it. Also, it's his best movie. I think Oppenheimer might unsee it, but when it comes to directing actors, obviously we talked about Heath Ledger. Although Heath Ledger's a tremendous actor, I think a lot of it, I think you have to dedicate a lot of it towards Nolan as well. Obviously as well, Aaron Eckhart, Christian Bale, Morgan Freeman, etc. Yeah, I think that's kind of all I have to say about that. I think it's not an extremely popular pick for this specific category. He wasn't nominated for Best Director either, unlike he was for Dunkirk, and I assume he will also be nominated and win for Oppenheimer as well. But it's my pick, and I'll stick with it.
I think we can just blame the Academy's superhero bias for him not getting nominated for that. It's a great pick. 100%. I mean, it's popular, but for a reason.
Yeah, I feel kind of weird picking it because it's everyone's pick, but you guys pick different things, which is good.
I'm just glad I've got another Dunkirk enjoyer here.
Yeah,
we are but a few, but we are loud.
Let's move on now to our next category. We're going to talk about Best Nolan Cinematography. This one might have been harder than Best Directorial Effort, to be honest.
Yeah.
Jennifer, we'll go to you first. What was your pick?
Oh God. Okay, this was really hard for me because like there's so much good cinematography and I'm like, yeah, and like so many of his movies. I'm gonna go with Inception, and that's because I think it goes back to that cinematic feel, and those sequences to me are like mesmerizing, like the way the buildings move, literally talk about world building. I think it's like fascinating in my opinion, and it just looks beautiful. Like I watched it and I was like, wow, I just think it's crazy. Like it looks really good in my opinion, and I think it adds a lot with the vibe of the movie, and it just looks so good. Like I had for the longest time so many of these like scenes engraved in my brain because I think it's just so beautiful. Like I remember one of my favorite scenes in this movie is like when they first show like I guess like the time and bending and like the buildings start moving and kind of like forming into this cube, and I think it's just mesmerizing to look at. A close second for me for this one though was Interstellar, because that one is also beautiful. I feel like those, like for a lot of these, Inception and Interstellar came so close that I was like, I don't know which one to pick, but I'm gonna stick with Inception for this one.
And both those movies
Well-
beautifully intertwine the cinematography with like the effects as well. Like the
Mhm.
black hole stuff Interstellar does is just incredible.
Yeah.
Well, you know what they say: one person's number 2 is another one's number 1. Mine is Interstellar. Like Jacob just helped me, so he took my point. So now
Sorry
I
for
can
stealing you.
with the combination of effects, and then also camera work as well. Yeah, what can I say about Interstellar? It has some of the most memorable shots of the 2010s. And it's also, I think it's masterful, whether you're talking about everything that happens on the different planets, but also what happens on Earth as well. When you're talking about the more practical shots in the cornfield or in that kind of place where Michael Caine has that little chalkboard thing, and then obviously the different planets. That water planet, I think it might be my favorite. I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing to say, but my favorite movie planet of all time. It's just so cool.
Such a
in
cool
the way it's
concept,
presented
yeah.
and the way it's shot. It's just so awesome. And then also the one, I don't know, the snow mountainous type planet as well.
The Matt Damon
and
planet.
It's so,
Matt
I don't know. I'm not a lot of filmmakers use the color gray as kind of as a tone throughout their movie. And it can become very kind of tedious and very boring at times. But I think this movie, its color palette, despite being very dry, I think it's still beautiful at the same time, which is a testament to, I think, how good the cinematography is. So, yeah. Jacob, we'll go to you.
Nolan, the undisputed champion of making boring colors like gray and blue absolutely pop on screen. I'm talking about blue making that color pop, and I'm going back Dunkirk for me again. I think that movie blends in cinematography and visual effects in a great way, but the way it uses practical effects, I think it's one of the great uses of the ocean in a movie. Everything is so blue, everything is so intense, and there's a lot of different kinds of stuff, like the aerial cinematography, the way they shot planes. Like everyone was talking about Top Gun Maverick innovating that, but Nolan was doing it with even older planes and putting cameras on them and stuff. Those shots are absolutely breathtaking. It's intense. The one shot that sticks out to me is when that dude like resurfaces and he's on fire, and just the way there's so many different terrifying images in that film. The shot of everyone drowning down in that boat, it's just when I think picture Nolan visuals, that's the movie that sticks out to me. The shot of Fionn Whitehead carrying on the beach with the explosions in the background, just that movie is so full of memorable images for me. So definitely my pick. Interstellar, very, very close second, because everything you just said, Homer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ever since the Dunkirk trailer, that shot really, really stuck with me.
It seems like every war movie nowadays has their big kind of no man's land shot. Like in 1917, you have the one where it's running and you have the explosions in the background. But yeah, Luke.
I'm not a big war movie guy, but Dunkirk is one of my favorite war movies.
Luke,
Yeah,
what is your
Jacob said it better than I ever could. My pick is also Dunkirk. That movie is just pure. Every shot goes hard. It's a very aesthetically pleasing movie. You could say it's definitely been featured in many an Instagram posts. Just the way the scale of the whole event and situation is captured. The aerial shots, of course, captures the scale and size of the ocean. The shots on the beach are my favorites. There, just the whole color grading of it all, and it's just a feast for the eyes, and goes back to Nolan just flexing his technical ability for the whole movie.
It's also so simple and streamlined, and I think it's probably his shortest movie, but it just packs such a big punch.
Yeah, I think it's the simplest, but it showcases his abilities just that much more, and also the staging of the actors as well. I think is just brilliant. So we move on to the next category. This one was really tough. Best lead performance in a Nolan movie. Jacob, we'll get started with you first. Will the recency bias come into play, folks? We shall see.
Yeah, it actually will. I'm going with Cillian Murphy in Oppenheimer. I didn't like. I'm like, all right, it probably won't be Murphy this summer. But I was looking through his films, and I'm thinking, no, I think it's Cillian Murphy. He is incredible in this film, and I think it is Nolan's deepest character study, and it is probably the most of any of his films that have been carried by one single actor. And I think it's so fitting because he's been such a key supporting player in almost all his films, to give him this lead role. And like, we all knew he was capable of this, but I think everyone's still blown away by it. And he manages to bring all the complexities that's required to one of the most complex characters ever put to screen. So I'm not going to waffle on because I won't be surprised if someone else picks this. But honorable mentions, I'll shout out Matthew McConaughey in Interstellar. I think might be his best performance. That's probably my number 2. But I think I'm going with Cillian Murphy. Talk to me in 6 months, we'll see. But yeah.
Luke, will you be going with Cillian Murphy?
Yeah, I was looking at the movies like, okay, leading performance, who is like has like a really like a challenging performance sort of is Matthew McConaughey and Cillian Murphy. I'm gonna go with Cillian Murphy because that movie depends so much on his performance alone, and the fact that he does deliver, he does carry the movie on his shoulders for a lot of it. Just the things he does with his eyes, he's always like looking shocked or staring and yeah, it has to be Cillian Murphy. He's almost in every scene in this 3-hour movie, like except for most of the black and white scenes. Yeah, he just captures the tragedy of this character and this event so perfectly. And I for now, I think he's going to win the Oscar, but we'll see if any other movies come out. And
it's going to be a fun race.
Yeah.
All right, Jennifer. Cillian Murphy, will the trend continue?
I'm going to say yes. If we had done this pre-Oppenheimer, I would have so gone Matthew McConaughey. He's still like my second pick, but yeah, you guys are right. Like he was in it for so much, and yeah, like Luke said, like this movie literally depended on his performance, and I think he did such a good job in playing this haunting character, and it goes both with his acting, the directing, the editing, the writing. Like this movie did such a good job at making you feel exactly what he was feeling, and like the scenes where he was being interrogated, especially one towards the end, like it felt like I was being interrogated, and it was because of his incredible performance. Just like so many things playing. I think he killed it, and not once do I think he was not once did I not think he was a believable Oppenheimer, like I think he was completely turned on the entire time in a sense with like what he had to do, and you can just tell he studied the character, studied the script, the writing. Like I feel like you can really tell when an actor puts in a lot of effort in the role, and I saw that a lot with him, and it was just great. Like even just the shots where like you guys were saying, like where he's just like staring into nothing and just staring. I'm like, I could feel exactly what he's feeling. Like I know exactly what he's saying without him saying a single word. And I loved his performance, and I guess we'll see if it stays up there, but like I haven't stopped thinking about his performance. I know I just watched it on Friday, but like I'm telling everybody who hasn't seen it, go watch it because it's just so well acted, and it's all because of him. He's really good in this movie.
Is he everybody's number 1 of the year so far?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who else
I think
is there?
I think I've still got Joaquin Phoenix for Beau is Afraid, but that's a close top 2.
If it was male or female, my favorite was Jennifer Lawrence in No Hard Feelings.
Hell yeah!
Yeah. Yeah, that was good.
The correct answer is Ryan Gosling and Barbie if we're talking over.
Sure, yes. This week I got so many of those answers for my favorite performances in different categories. So, but you know what they say, one person's number 2 is another one's number 1. I chose Matthew McConaughey. I'm sticking with it for now in Interstellar. Nice. But again, if you ask me, like, was it like 3 hours from now, I could change my mind. So, this is I don't know. It's subject to change. But yeah, Matthew McConaughey, definitely the most emotionally invested I have been in any of Nolan's characters. He does a lot, whether that's pain, whether that's loss, whether that's happiness, like in the first 20, 30 minutes, like when you, especially kind of as you almost grow up with this character, but he doesn't age a single bit almost. So it's kind of a weird feeling that it gives you, but I feel like you feel that growth. Despite the fact that he himself doesn't age, but everyone else around him does. And I think it's his best performance. I like Dallas Buyers Club a lot more than a lot of people do, but I still think I'm going to stick with this as my favorite Matthew McConaughey performance. So, yeah, I'm going to stick with him. Although my
that's what I love about Murph, man. I get older, she stays the same age.
Yes.
Other way around. But I had to quote Dazed and Confused.
Maybe if he said that in Interstellar, you guys would have gone with him as your pick. Maybe not, though. Maybe that would have lowered him in your rankings. I don't know. But yeah, we are now on to our favorite category, Best Nolan Picture, the finale, folks. This is what it all has come down to. The entire episode has been leading up to this moment.
It's actually
Luke,
a
we'll go
rare
to you
episode where I
first.
don't know what everyone's going to pick. I think I might know what you're going to pick, Helma, but...
Luke, what are you picking? You told us earlier in the episode, so I'm going to go with you first.
Yeah, I'm going with the recency bias. I'm going with Oppenheimer. It will take a few rewatches, of course, for it to solidify, which I definitely will be doing at the theater very soon. But it was just such an incredible experience. About when they were a while into the Los Alamos section of the film, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be absolutely one of his best. And by the time I reached the end, it was the Trinity test. That whole scene had my heart racing like crazy. I don't remember the last time a movie had done that for me to that level of just sheer. Even if we know that it worked and it didn't blow up the atmosphere, it's still so intense. And then it finally happens. I've been hyping myself, hyping the scene in my head for months. How is it going to look? And it looks spectacular. The whole character study of Oppenheimer was fascinating. It lived up to the book, of course. But the last scene especially is what stuck with me most. And when it ended, I had this massive, heavy feeling, this massive weight on my chest. And I don't know what other movie has managed to do that for me. Just in general, not just Nolan movies. In general, it was such a very haunting movie. Lots of science. I love the science in Nolan movies, in Tenet and in Interstellar.
And in The Flash.
And I hope in The Flash. Well, The Flash is more like, okay, let's just have a guess. But a good analogy nonetheless. So yeah, Oppenheimer.
All right. Jacob, we'll go to you next. What did you pick?
If in Oppenheimer someone used a pencil and paper to demonstrate like theoretical physics, then it would be my number one, But Interstellar a close second, but my number one's Dunkirk. Obviously. Not many people's Nolan pick, and I get that, but that is a very special movie for me, and I've probably said just about everything I can say about it, but I've seen it more times than any other Nolan film. Probably helps that it has a shorter runtime, but I think I went and saw it like 5 times in theaters. I don't know, I was just so moved by it, and the fact that a movie that is not a character study could move me so emotionally about a war that I've never really had that much attachment to. I just think it is a brilliant piece of filmmaking about individual sacrifice. And I just think it's a beautiful movie, and Nolan at his absolute peak. But again, he has like 5 or 6 movies that I could call absolute classics, and Interstellar would be a very, very close second. Oppenheimer's probably like 5th for me, and that's an incredible film. That's how deep his filmography bats. But yeah, Dunkirk.
So I'm going to go next with my pick. It's been between a few, but I'm ultimately going to go for The Dark Knight, the generic pick. For some reason, I feel like since Oppenheimer's come out, even before that, last few years, there's been this weird hatred towards The Dark Knight, or this weird kind of backlash towards it for being so overrated and blah blah blah. Which
people
I just
always turn
around,
against popular things.
It's around the time of the Batman.
It's been such a I get it for the Joker. It's a year or a couple months after it's come out, but this movie has been out for 15 years now, and you're just being like, wait a second, it might be overrated. And now, why didn't you say that 2 years ago? I'm not sure I believe you.
I've been saying it's overrated for years. Yeah, I still love it, but
no. If you say it's overrated for years, sure, but if it's like the last 2 months, you just figured that out now, wow. Coincidence? I think not. But anyways, I'm gonna start on a more positive note. It's just one of my favorite movies of all time. It's one of my, from every aspect, I think it's a great movie. I have a bit of bias because Batman, since I was younger, he's been such a kind of important part of my childhood. And this was the first movie, despite not being as much of a Batman movie as, say, The Batman. I still think it is a great movie overall, great, whatever you want to call it, a great Michael Mann-esque crime movie, whatever you want to call it. I think, like I mentioned before, with directorial stuff and screenplay stuff, from every aspect, it's basically a perfect movie. It does everything well. I don't think there's any area of the movie that's necessarily weak. I think as a action movie, as a crime movie, as a drama, as a thriller, everything, it can be considered a perfect movie. I think every scene is perfect in the way they're constructed. I think the way it builds tension. I think the performances. I think the cinematography, the editing, blah, blah, blah. I think it's Nolan's best movie to date. And he still has a lot of filmmaking years ahead of him. So if we do another director showcase with Christopher Nolan in 40 years, when, you know, we're all gray and wrinkly, I think our answers might change. But maybe
They will
not.
still say The Dark Knight.
There's a good
no
chance
matter
that it does. Yeah. But I'm going for The Dark Knight. But
I'm
Jennifer,
just thankful he proved he's still got it after Tenet.
yes. Jennifer, you're our special guest today. You chose Christopher Nolan. You
Yeah.
are the expert here. So it all comes down to this. You've had a lot of different answers throughout this episode. So I'm very curious to see what you're going to pick for best Nolan picture.
The movie I'm about to say is my third favorite movie of all time, and although I haven't chosen it sometimes for different categories, it's Interstellar. I
Hell yeah.
love this
Yeah.
movie. I think it's my favorite father-daughter relationship put to screen ever because of how good it is, and it's one of those movies where it's one of my favorites just literally of all time in general because I very much emotionally connected to it, and I found myself with some of the characters, and I think that's a very special thing that happens with movies, and I love that Nolan just made this movie because like it was one of those things when I saw it I was like, wow, like I'm going to be responding to this for so many years because I think it's just so well written, it's well acted, the cinematography is great, the score is great. Like, you know, although I didn't pick it for some of the other categories, I still think this movie is incredible, and it also has some of my favorite editing in general. A lot of the times, a lot of the emotional scenes in this movie worked because of how it's edited. One of my favorite scenes in this movie as well is like the scene where Matthew McConaughey's character is like seeing the tapes of his daughter and son and they're like growing up, and it's just like that very famous scene of him basically in tears just crying at this. Like I just think it's so emotional, and I also love Murph as a character. I think Jessica Chastain is really good in this movie too, and I just really emotionally connect with this movie on like a level that I don't with a lot of other movies, and it's just a very special one for me. I love Interstellar, and it looks gorgeous on the 4K. This is one of the 4Ks that I own, and I watched this movie so many times, and it's a great one. And I also really really love like the twist that this movie has and what it has to say about time and sort of like just the importance of us. And it I don't know, this movie is just it's so good, it's so special. It brings tears to my eyes, it makes me happy to watch it. It's like a human like emotional roller coaster for me, and yeah, I love Interstellar.
I love how earnest it is. I know a lot of people will criticize the love line and the bookshelf dimension, but I don't know. I just love that it wears its heart on its sleeve, and it has hope for our stupid little species.
Yeah.
I agree.
We need
Also
Jessica
interesting how we
Chastain
all had
back in a
different
Nolan
picks.
movie.
Chastain would have been my runner-up for supporting performance, I think, as well.
Yeah, me too.
And that's going to do it, guys, for all our picks for the best of Christopher Nolan. But real quickly, Jennifer briefly mentioned it earlier in the episode, how she wished Nolan would delve deep into horror. What are your guys' wishes for what Christopher Nolan should do next now that his new movie Oppenheimer has hit theaters?
Dunkirk 2.
The French come to the beach, kind of promise still there.
They go back to Dunkirk.
Dunkirk makes the dude bro Afghanistan war movie or something. No, I think you nailed it with horror. I think that would be amazing.
Yeah, I would love for him to do a horror or like just like a deep thriller would be so fun. Like just I mean those horror is my favorite genre. So if he would do a horror movie, like I think my life would be complete. Like that's it. I'm done. This is what I've been waiting for. That would be incredible.
And I think if Oppenheimer, which I suspect it will, if it does well from an awards point of view, if it wins picture, obviously, even if it wins him just director, not picture, I think it will satisfy his urges to get that long lost Oscar, and a horror movie will become even more evident to be in the future as it has before.
Yeah, it would also be really cool to see him return to maybe a simpler drama or thriller like a Prestige, Memento, Insomnia type movie, because there are not many of those mid-budget movies for grown-ups coming out in theaters anymore, and Nolan's one of the few people who kind of has the pull to get something like that made and get it seen. So yeah, something simple would be cool, but also if he's got the resources, go nuts, make a crazy horror sci-fi thing. But yeah, no, he's back, and I'm excited for what's next.
Luke, I'm sure you've heard him recently say that he wants to direct a James Bond movie, which Jacob
I don't
might
want
have
him
to
to do that. James Bond's boring.
Will he direct a James Bond movie, Luke? Or have we already gotten that Tenet?
The thing is, Tenet is such a Bond movie already in a Nolan fashion. I do wonder what. Come on, Jacob, you're losing me there. We had the Dunkirk thing
brothers,
going.
I'm sorry.
We're doing well. But no, if he does do a James Bond thing, I will absolutely be excited for that. He would definitely want to make it his own, do something they haven't done before. There's a cool theory that maybe they should take the Bond movies back to the 60s, have them be set in the 60s, just do something like that. I think Nolan might be up for that. Outside of that, I would like to see a Tenet sequel, to see how Tenet was formed. They could title it Tenet, but it's backwards. I would like to see
the protagonist will return.
I'd like to see Robert Pattinson in another Nolan movie.
Yes.
He was just such a pleasure in Tenet. I think before maybe it's too late, we need Mr. Practical Nolan, Mr. I do my own stunts Cruise to collaborate somehow.
Yes,
I don't know
yes,
that would be, but
I'd also like to see him maybe tackle something with a female lead, because he hasn't done that yet.
yes, that is something we need.
You know, Tom Cruise loves his female leads, Jacob.
Oh, yeah.
So, well, maybe that's where Rebecca Ferguson goes.
I'm still upset.
But yeah, that's gonna do it, folks, for our director showcase on Christopher Nolan. But before we go, Jacob, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Jacob Watches Films. Basically, I'll link to everything I'm doing there. I also started a podcast of my own recently with my best friend Jaron. It's called The Film Draft. Basically, every week we get a guest on and we choose a topic and do like a fantasy sports style draft of choosing movies and then argue over who picked the best one. So you'll find that linked from my Instagram page as well. And I make YouTube videos sometimes. I do a lot of Oscar type stuff. So that'll probably kick off pretty soon as well. Yeah.
And Luke, where can everyone find you? Obviously,
they can find me at Luke Reviews on Instagram and rarely on YouTube. But keep an eye out for my top 10 movies of 2023 next year, where Oppenheimer will surely make the list. Or you can find me
inconsistent YouTuber gang rise up.
Very, very much so. It wouldn't be interesting otherwise. Or you can find me hosting right here on this channel.
Jennifer.
So I'm on Instagram, as my handle says, but mostly you can find me on YouTube. I have been a little bit inconsistent, but I'm trying to get back to posting every single week. But yeah, you can just find me. I do all sorts of movie related videos like collections, movie reviews, spoiler talks, top 10s, and I'm trying to make my channel a combination of movie reviews, but also stuff with my own filmmaking and filmmaking tips and short films and stuff like that. And my YouTube channel is just my name, Jennifer Vega.
Perfect. And you can find us as always, TLC_productions_. You can find me on Letterboxd at Alex Homer. TikTok, we don't really post there anymore because I don't have that much time. But if you want to see some fun clips from the past, check out the League of Cinephiles on TikTok as well. And thank you guys for being here. We'll see you next month with, I'm sure, will be another fun episode with another great director. Jacob, Luke, a pleasure as always. Jennifer, thank you again for being on. And guys, we'll see you soon. Ciao.
Who I grew up watching?
Roderick Rules.
Yes,
Roderick
Roger Rules. Yes.